No. Okay, so I have three quick little stories.
Okay.
Stories that, for me, tie together a little bit, right? So the first one has to do with this law that just passed with catalytic converters, right? There's been an enormous across the country because there's been multiple laws like this in different states that have been passed because people are stealing catalytic converters because of the precious metals that are inside of them and then selling them to junkyards, right?
Yeah, I think it's cobalt or something in there.
Yeah,
some fancy joint in there.
Yeah,
we at my last my old business. Luckily, it never happened to any of our vehicles, but a bunch of the other businesses in that industrial park got hit one day. They all came in, and all their catalytic converters got stripped out of their cars overnight.
What the fuck does a catalytic converter do? It's on the muffler, right? Or it's in the exhaust system?
It's in the exhaust system, and I'm not a scientist.
It just takes some of the particles out.
Yeah, it removes the amount of carbon that is put out from the exhaust.
It's on some green shit.
Yeah, it's on some green stuff. Yeah, it's all about emissions control.
So this article is from KDVR, and that's in Colorado.
Platinum.
There you go, Platinum also. And I remember hearing a story about it once, and that was a while ago. But we have a law now that has to do with if you own a junkyard or something and you're going to buy a catalytic converter, you have to have paperwork that proves that catalytic converter came out of the car that this person owns.
Oh, okay.
So I would imagine there's a serial number that can be matched to the VIN number on the car. But so, yeah, you have to get this paperwork or else you can be held liable for it. So this story is out of Lakewood, Colorado. Denver police told Fox 31 that there were 500 reported catalytic converters stolen in the first 3 months of this year alone. Woo! That's more than 5 every day. Denver police are warning the public that's not just a costly nuisance, but it could be dangerous as well. Thieves are starting to post an armed lookout to intercept anyone who catches them in the act. And I have seen multiple stories in Seattle, New York, big cities of people coming out of their house to confront people who are stealing their catalytic converter and getting into violent altercations with them. I've seen people discharge firearms. Yeah, I've seen violent shit over catalytic converters.
And I feel like the trope is, generally speaking, the people that are doing that are like tweakers. They're like meth heads, and they're looking. That's how they fund their enterprise. You know, they fund their addiction by stealing this stuff and then finding a chop shop that'll take it. And it is no surprise to me that if you try to have a confrontation with somebody that is that desperate to be trying to give you extra gas mileage by stealing your catalytic converter, that it's going to turn out bad because they're already in a desperate situation where they're trying to steal that from you and it's not a simple endeavor. It's not like it's not something you can just pocket and walk away with.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is an in-depth situation.
It's not too difficult. This story is from Toledo, Washington. Authorities in Washington said they've arrested a man on theft and burglary charges after being caught with dozens of stolen catalytic converters. Lewis County Sheriff's Office said deputies responded to reports of someone entering a business and stealing 26 catalytic converters off of new trucks during the overnight hours on July 13th.
Good
so he
boosted
26 in one night.
Enterprising individual.
So
busting his ass.
Yes, according to the sheriff's office, this guy was taken into custody and search warrant for his vehicle led to the recovery of the 26 stolen catalytic converters. 38-year-old is facing charges of second-degree burglary and first-degree theft.
Wow.
So
I got to watch some YouTube videos about how you remove a catalytic converter.
Well, it looks like if that's actually the catalytic converter, it doesn't look like it's that hard.
No.
Like it looks like it's just a couple of brackets that you just unbolt and
it also looks like you could just make a much more theft-proof endeavor. You know, some kind of system that you can't just fucking bolt off like that.
Some type of housing.
Yeah. Versus passing a law, but
it looks like it's just 2 U-clamps with bolts on either, like nuts on either side, and you just unscrew the bolts and pull it out, and then you just separate it from the muffler or from the exhaust system and just pull it off.
I think Bilbo knows what he's talking about. So depending on the car, it's how easy it is to get off.
And that's makes sense, as is everything else in a vehicle. One thing is going to be take 2 seconds. The other one, you're going to have to remove half the fucking engine to take it off. So, no, I'm like that. So, I'm always torn about stuff like this because I don't like the idea of making it more difficult for a business owner to make money. He's just trying to sell shit, you know? He shouldn't have to worry about whether or not this item is stolen, but it implicates him in the theft and deprivation of someone else of their property, and it inadvertently involves him in this problem that he now has someone's property that he sold to somebody else, so he doesn't belong to him, but he shouldn't be out money for having sold this to somebody even though he doesn't own this object.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
At what point does his where is his responsibility kick in to ensure that the property that this individual is selling him is indeed that person's property?
Right.
How much due diligence is involved? I know that, we have a really big scrapyard just out of, in Bremerton, just out of the city proper, essentially,
Right.
that Navy City Metal and stuff like that. And they've had, they already have existing kind of practices at that facility where they don't just take whatever it is. They build a relationship with the individual, and generally speaking, they have to be like a legitimate business to do business there. And it can cause problems, I'm sure, for them, but it also helps their own liability at that point, because they don't want to be
Right.
scrapping a bunch of boosted shit.
Especially wire, copper wire and stuff like that. If
there's a lot of red flags and shit.
Yeah, if you come with not even spools of it, but like rolls of it,
Yeah.
It's like,
And if
where
you're
do you get all of this copper wiring from?
Yeah. And if you're like a legitimate contractor that has a fucking business license number and you have a reputation in the community and stuff
Right.
like that, and you're going there to sell off the scrap from construction jobs and shit like that, that's a more comfortable situation for that person to be in, because he knows he's legitimate, versus I've seen it happen before where there are guys that will just swing around to different construction sites and then legitimately just go on and try to talk to the supervisor and be like, hey, if I see you guys got a bunch of scrap metal you guys dug up out there, do you have any plan to get rid of that? I could take it off your hands for you.
Right.
And a lot of times the contractors are like, yeah, man, fucking take it. But the dude, he looks like
He's
a fucking
sus.
degen,
Yeah.
and he's driving some beat up little thing, but he's just scrapping.
Right.
Does that guy
Just
deserve
scrapping.
to not? Does he deserve to not try to make a living by doing it as as weird as the way that might be?
It's a legitimate way to make money. Yeah. It's like people who mow someone's lawn. I wouldn't want to live that way, but if you want to fucking mow lawns for however much you're going to charge per lawn, we should. Yeah.
I get real hesitant when it comes to like that. Mercantilism style regulations and stuff like that, government control. You need fucking 30 different forms to be able to sell your fucking sheep to the butcher shop down the road or something like that.
And this is why I'd like to think that like insurance would be involved. If someone steals your catalytic converter and they sell it, because some of these articles are saying I don't know enough about cars to decide. Some of these articles are saying it can essentially total your vehicle because of how much it costs for you to replace your catalytic converter.
Oh, yeah.
That if your car is not new enough, then it's removing half the value of your car and it's totaled anyway. So your insurance company is just going to write you a check for a brand new car. So.
Oh yeah, with all the precious metal, there's a reason it's being stolen.
Right. The hang up on that, obviously, is you can't fucking drive your car without a catalytic converter on it, is what it sounds like to me.
Generally speaking, you just get more horsepower.
So,
But if generally, the reason most manufacturers are putting those things on and
you can
stuff,
be fined if you don't have one also.
Yes,
Which
and
makes
it depends
sense.
on where you
Yeah.
live, but most places nowadays have emissions regulations.
Yes.
And, like in, say, like the state of Massachusetts,
Yeah.
every year when you get your registration and stuff like that, you have to do another emissions test.
And here it's based on the county. Like
Yeah.
in King County, if you live
have
in
to.
King, you have to do an emissions test. I know
Yep.
when my mom was dating a guy whose brother lived in like Burien, he would register his cars over here so he didn't have to do the emissions test, and then he just lived in Burien. So he would just drive over here and register his cars and then drive back home. It was worth it to not have to. I don't know
Right.
how much they cost because I've never had to do one, but
Yeah.
I can't be cheap if he's willing to drive from Burien over an hour from Burien to Kitsap County to register his car. So
It's got to be worth the price of admission, though.
yeah,
Especially
Oh,
if you
God.
think if you got to redo it every year or something like that.
Yes,
That's
yes.
just another tax on you having a piece of property.
Your fucking car. And he had a big old van, and that's why he did it, because he had just a fucking super old van.
Yeah.
You can drive it. It actually helps with some cars for miles per gallon and horsepower. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think it has something to do with the recycling of exhaust and all
Right,
that. And
right.
I'm not a mechanic or anything, but I've always heard that if you just have a straight exhaust, the engine works more efficiently.
I pretty much only know about things that have broken in my vehicles.
Right.
That's about the extent of my knowledge, is the things that have broken, I've researched them and say, I understand now what this piece does.
Yeah.
And then we'll replace it and move on. So,
And eventually, after a number of years, you just
Yes.
know your car inside and out.
exactly. I have a rudimentary understanding of the workings of of a combustion engine.
Right.
I understand the concept behind what is happening. I could not lay out all of the pieces that are involved in it. I understand the general concept of the micro explosions held inside of a piece of metal that move the rock. I get that, but
that's about as far as I go. That makes sense to me. You know?
That's crazy that someone did that, but I'm here for it, and I love the car. Yeah, no, that's about builds up more carbon.
More carbon.
Yeah.
You know, man, I love all this green talk and stuff lately about removing carbon and lowering carbon emissions and all this stuff. And I'm like, Tim Pool on IRL, maybe sometime last week or something like that, he was asking Ian, he goes, what are trees made out of?
What are trees made out of?
Carbon. Oh, yeah. So it's like, yeah, because they absorb carbon.
Right.
And, you know, produce oxygen. I'm like, yeah, I wonder what, like, how that works out. I need to talk to some scientists about this shit. Because if you get rid of all the carbon, it would make sense that, like, nothing could grow. Because matter doesn't just materialize out of nothing. So I'd be really interested in that. But it got me thinking about this stuff. And, like, there's just all this. We got to cut back carbon, remove your carbon footprint and all this stuff. I'm like, well, but then how are the trees going to grow, man? Like, there needs to be some. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I'd
there's
be real
carbon
curious.
in your poop and your farts and all that type of shit. You know, all the waste and
I
everything.
think everything is basically some form of carbon.
I would be willing to. I'd be willing to bet that there is a certain amount of carbon emissions, like artificially made carbon emissions from cars and shit like that, that we benefit from. That, like, as a race or as a species, we probably can't make enough carbon to benefit. I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. We probably can't make enough naturally to do whatever needs to be done at this point. So I bet if you had to strike a perfect balance, they'd be like, we need you to produce this much. Like, you got to produce still a little bit, not as much as you're doing. That's too much, but you still some, because or else you won't have enough.
Yeah.
That's like, so that's all. I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about, but don't.
Right.
Welcome to the south of the streets, coming at you